Hello everybody and welcome back to The Insider. This week I am delighted to be joined by David Germain. David is the Group CIO of RSA Group. Hello David.
Ben, thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. I would like to do an introduction, but I could never give it justice. Could you give an overview to the listeners, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, David Germain. What can I tell the audience? So look, I'm a father of 3 kids, been with my wife for over 20 years. We live in the southeast of England at a personal level. From a work perspective, I've been a technologist most of my career, always worked in financial services, really focused on business change, business transformation, technology enabled. And I started my career at a young age. I started at 16. I started off as an apprentice developer. And I'm one of these classic, worked my way up through the ranks, worked for multiple firms at different points, always looking to sort of learn and progress my career. So I think at the heart of me, I'm a life learner. I'm forever the student. I'm always inquisitive about what's happening in the world, what's happening in technology, and how we can leverage that, not just for the companies I'm working for, but just in general around how can we improve society. So family man, life learner.
Excellent. And what I wanted to kind of go into now, I think over the last couple of weeks, I've discussed a bit about where companies have had to kind of adapt to the COVID situation. I'd like to be quite positive about this now. You know, we are beginning to move out, and I think there's a hell of a lot of lessons that can be learned, especially when I look at a business like RSA and the challenges that you guys must have faced. It'd be interesting for me to kind of start off on where you find yourself now. Maybe I guess as a business and maybe as a kind of leadership team.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible when you take a step back and you look at the last 15 plus weeks in the world, and you look at most firms and what they've had to do to come through this crisis. And I'll speak on behalf of every organisation. The heroics of technology functions to come through this based on the different operating setups we have for our respective businesses has been absolutely amazing. So it's a big thank you from me to everyone out there that's been part of this journey.
Absolutely.
I think for our firm, it's been a challenge, right? So we've been distributing laptops, we've been getting platforms to work remotely, changing policies, changing processes, working with a myriad of third parties. We've been in that spectrum exponentially in the same way as some firms have been, trying to get the ecosystem to work for our business with minimal business disruption, working with our business continuity team. So the effort's been amazing. As we come through that now, I think it's understanding what have we changed that's benefited the organization. What do we need to readdress that potentially is something which we don't want to take forward, and what do we want as a workforce of the future based on the digital changes we've made to our businesses, our functions, our departments in the past 15 plus weeks. And that's the sort of prognosis and diagnosis we're doing now. We're really trying to understand what are the digital changes we've made which really benefit internal teams and our customers. And we don't want to take that away from the organization. In fact, we want to take it as our starting base and leverage and improve on it and build on top of it, and not sort of regress back to what we were doing 15 weeks prior.
Yeah, I think that's first of all, I echo everything you're saying in terms of technology teams. I think I've never been prouder to work in the industry, to be honest with you. And it's a funny one because and please don't mind me saying it, I think in general as a technology recruiter who over the last few years has mainly worked with startup businesses, so on the other scale of a huge organization 300 odd years old like RSA, but the insurance business or the industry maybe has got a little bit of a stigma that the technology might be slightly behind. So do you feel that this is accelerating then the kind of digital transformations and use of digital within the insurance industry as a whole?
I think it will help, right? I think we've now explored technologies, the paradigm shift for technologies and how they can be more pervasive and getting better use out of them has absolutely been explored by some firms in the past 15 weeks. So utilization of Teams as an example, utilization of moving to more VDI solutions, more remote solutions, I think really has helped collaboration tools for teams that are working remotely or offshore and onshore. I think will benefit the organisations moving forward. So I do agree on that front. I would always say I spent most of my career in what was banking, which was perceived as being 5-10 years ahead of insurance. That's really not the case, right?
No.
I think the business models lead to how you utilise the technologies. And where you have models in insurance which are still heavily leveraged to physical interaction, paper-based interaction, trading environments that are more on the commercial line side, where you don't need to necessarily have all of these technologies, right? And actually, it's more around the risk teams, the underwriting teams, people actually looking at information and making assessments based on years and years of experience of doing this. I think technology can give you a bit of a head start in terms of how you arrange material, data. I think we can talk about data scientists and how they work, but there's still a level here of you need good people with good experience to work deals and to make the right decisions. So some of that human behavior, I don't think is going to completely go away.
No, absolutely, I agree.
So business models are really important when we talk about insurance. I think the other aspect is some of the technologies are the same, Ben. We get caught up in that, right? Proprietary platforms are proprietary platforms. We're seeing a lot more low-code platforms move into the industry and SaaS and cloud-based solutions. That's probably where you're going to see the biggest swing shift in the future in insurance.
Okay.
Just not settling for high cost, high expense ratios with proprietary platforms that you have to highly develop and build custom rules against. Why does anyone want to do that, right? What you want low-code platforms that are in the cloud that you can configure.
Absolutely.
You want SMEs that really understand the business, and you want your technology organization to really focus on products and services and digitalization and less around the infrastructure, which there are better organizations that can do that. And there are organizations with more experience. So I think that's where you're going to see the change. But I would never want to turn around and say, and do the sector I'm in a disservice, because I've learned about the sector. It's not really about the immaturity of technology. It's how you create an ecosystem based on the business models you have and how those technologies can better enable those business models. Yeah,
absolutely. No, good. And in terms of you're talking about teams there and how, I guess, the level of communication has to be, a business your size, and how technology can help with that. How do you, when you've got different departments, you're talking obviously technology, you're talking, I guess, products, and everybody's really got to come together and everyone's got different challenges. How do you look after and implement the communication channels through the rest of the business in this kind of environment?
Everything starts with having the right structures in place, right? So we have, in a time of crisis, everyone will have a business continuity organization in some way, shape or form. And prior to this pandemic, most organizations would have done some form of testing just to make sure their infrastructure stood up to the load of people working in a distributed way. So, we're no different. We did exactly the same.
Excellent.
But through that testing process, we also test communication protocols. We also test different teams, different leadership teams, how they come together, the problems they're trying to solve, how they communicate that on a daily basis. We test how we detect the problem and respond and communicate within smaller groups in the organization that need to know and make decisions. And then how do you broaden that communication out across the whole firm, right? And that can come from CEOs, that can come from managing directors, that can come from team leaders. At every level in the organization, you need to ensure there's a consistent message. And you use the medium you've always used. So for some teams that were co-located, it would have been easy. You stand up in the morning, you take everyone to the cafeteria, you do 20 minutes, you talk about what the day's going to entail, what the focus needs to be, and then people go away and they get on with it. How do you do that? How do you create that same cultural think tank? How do you create that same cultural environment when, we're talking to each other on Zoom, as an example? You sort of have to follow the same scripts. You have to get everyone on a Zoom call. You've got to do 10 minutes. You've got to make sure everyone feels they're part of it. They can be heard. They can be listened to. They can be, they can respond to their actions and their needs. And you have to take advantage of the distribution mediums that you have in-house to follow the same script. It's different. It's not the same. You can't have the cooler conversation, but you can still pick up the phone to your colleagues. You can FaceTime each other. And that's what we're really seeing. We're seeing people utilize every aspect of video-based technologies to allow them to interact with their teams, their project teams, their functional teams, and with their line managers and one-on-ones and their colleagues at work.
I'd agree with that, So I only look after a small team myself, but I think that, and this has come from a lot of business leaders and technology leaders I've spoken to, that they feel that, the teams feel a bit closer together off the back of this. And the reason I say that is, first of all, everyone's in it, you're all in it together. So you have a level of ownership and empathy. But it was interesting what you just said then about kind of just using video technology in general. So say for example, I wanted to call one of my team, I don't know, in an evening, I would just call them. I wouldn't necessarily FaceTime them. Now everything's FaceTime. I've got so used to Zoom fatigue is actually a real thing, which is quite amusing. But I can absolutely get it, and I think that now the kind of level of communication has changed dramatically for even a small business like myself. So now I can absolutely understand that. Where do you see the next couple of months? What's next? How do you think this is? I think we're talking about the kind of learnings and where we are and how kind of we're leveraging technology to kind of assist us at the moment. Where do you see the next couple of months going? I think that I don't think we're suddenly going back into an office altogether. What do you see coming next for you and your team?
Well, I think what the government lays down as the standards and the guidelines is really important for every organisation, because then you can start to build up your policies, your practices, your processes in-house of how you want your organisations to return to work. I think what we've seen people in the parks more, right? We've seen gyms open up this week, right? We've seen hotels start to open. Stores have always opened, but it seems that they're more aware now of this pandemic and they put better protocols in place. We're seeing the economy, the industry, services start to return to some level of normality, which means industry will also start to return to some level of normality. So my expectation is we'll see more firms open the doors again, but I think it will be different, because I think what we've all learned is we can work remotely.
Yeah, it's
fine for your staff to work remotely. It opens up so much more in terms of motivation, flexibility of work, social mobility. It even opens up a new workforce in the future, right? That's my personal view. And I think it's going to be a case of how do we now return to work? What's the acceptable practice of being in the office, right? And do you need to be in the office? And how do you now work with your team, your managers, as you return to work? So I love the myth busting that's happened here in the last weeks, because we've proven that a myriad of things can happen remotely. You don't need to be in the office. I think it's still really important. The human touch is really important, that interaction. When you're working remotely for such a long time, you do lose that interaction. So I think it's important you retain that in some way, shape or form. But I'm not speaking on behalf of RSA, I'm speaking on behalf of my person. I think it would be a shame if we don't maintain some level of this practice which we're currently in longer term, because I think it's really beneficial for people and their families.
Yeah, and I don't mind saying, well, I have a business partner, and I think that I was always keen to push for more remote work, because in our game we can work remotely. All we need is really the telephone and the internet and a laptop. My business partner, not so much, and he would openly say this. It was although he would trust our staff, he would still have this thing inside his head that would, like, if they're at home, they're on this morning or something. It's something crazy. They're not working as hard. But that is completely, his mindset is completely different now. When we started working from home, productivity levels probably rose. People probably working harder and trying to help more candidates. And us as a business, we try to reach out and offer anything that we could in any way, shape or form to support our clients. So it doesn't necessarily mean having requirements to fill. You can help in other ways. And I think the team really bought into that. So I think it really, really helped. And just quickly, what I wanted to touch on you, one more thing, is regards projects. How are you guys at the moment? What I'm finding is, or I guess within technology, most projects don't get cancelled, maybe they slow down a little bit. Has this kind of had, what kind of impact has it had on kind of project delivery?
Yeah, I think, the first few months, we probably had to get all of our teams arranged offshore. Teams that were co-located, they probably had to get used to working with a different culture than they had prior to the pandemic. So getting all that logistical stuff arranged with third-party organisations and SI providers and internal teams caused a bit of a slowdown and some program impact. But I think the realisation is once you come through all of that, the project's still the project. Unless the business have made a decision they don't want to do it anymore, in which case you stop it, you sort of carry on. What you do is you have to carry on at a different pace, understand what teams need to really work hard on staying close. So you tend to find development teams working with digital teams, working with requirements teams, have to work really hard around clarification of issues, transparency of information. They have to do a lot of calls to get that working.
I agree.
But we have no designs to stop anything. I think the projects still add a lot of value for our businesses. There's still a ton of material benefit to doing them. They provide the same values they were going to unlock for the organisation prior to COVID. So our plan is to carry on. I think the difference is being more logistically aware of the new dynamic and how we configure our teams to be successful in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. At the beginning of the pandemic, things that have an impact on the project that I was seeing was kind of asynchronous requests. So maybe somebody going to a platform engineer and asking them to do something, but when normally there'd be a channel in an office, and that would have a knock-on effect, and that's why people are working longer. And I think it just comes back, but everything to the communication level. But I think everything's kind of worked its way out as we've got. It happened so quickly, David. I don't think that any project just kind of carried on as normal. One thing I really wanted to pick up with you as well, and I hope you don't mind. I saw a post on LinkedIn that you put a couple of weeks ago now, regards Black Lives Matter. And obviously, for myself, I think with the George Floyd situation, it's society has been made far more aware of everything at the moment. And as a black man in a leadership position in a huge organisation, I'm really interested in your thoughts on what's happened over the last few weeks.
Yeah, first of all, my heart goes out to George Floyd and his family and everyone that's had to deal with death in the family due to prejudice and racism in some way, shape or form. I think, again, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of my business, because I think that's important. My message went out solely based on the fact I received over 3,000 personal messages on LinkedIn from people.
Wow.
Asking me, as someone who they see as a leader in industry, what my views are, what we can do to help. And I just get a myriad of messages all the time about people wanting support with their careers, people that have had challenges in the organisations they work for, people dealing with some real situations which I've never dealt with in my career, as an example. And I thought it was the right thing to do. My wife's white, my kids are mixed race. I had to explain these issues to my elder son, who's 12, and he didn't get it. Right? It's tough. It's tough for someone to see these things in the news and to correlate it with what happens in reality. And I told him some personal stories about things I've dealt with in my career and my life, and he was surprised at that. And I just felt it was the right thing to do, just to keep on raising the awareness. Society making these wholesale changes will never be easy, right? And we're talking about generational prejudice, generational racism in society. It's great that it's being made aware now, and we're putting a focus on it. I think it can be a bit taboo, and I think there can be a bit of tissue rejection, i.e., I don't believe you, I don't really see the problem. I'm seeing a bit of that start to materialise as well.
Really?
Some of the things we've done to make changes around icons and taking statues down, I sort of get why we're doing that, but that's not addressing the problem. Addressing the problem is, how do we ensure we have a fair society for all? How do we ensure there's equality? Anyone from any walk of life is given the same opportunity, academically, professionally, whatever it is their chosen desires are, they're given I call it a fair shake to get it done. And, we see that in the sporting environment. Although I've spoken to professionals, look, I've spoken to many sporting professionals, and they say to me, David, you may see the elitism where you have some sports with black professionals doing extremely well, but if you spend time talking to those individuals, they'll tell you how they were treated on the way to getting to that point. So that's a fair debate, and that's a fair riposte to my statement. But I'm so pleased.
No, what I'd say onto that, I'd say football managers, and how many football league teams are there? 92 football league teams. How many back managers and how many back managers go through for interviews. As a football fan, you hear a lot about this, but nothing seems to have changed. So that's what would frustrate me. I think it's always about. I don't think you or I would disagree on the right person always getting the job. I work in recruitment, but I think the point is that everyone has a fair chance and has a fair crack of the whip. And I think for somebody who grew up in South London myself, in a multicultural environment, who always understood everything about racism, but had no prejudice whatsoever, I've learned an incredible amount in the last couple of weeks. And it's the awareness. I think the awareness is key. And I just hope that as a country, as businesses, we can continue to raise awareness, because I think it's vitally important for your children and your children's children.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Look, I'm hopeful. I would like to keep on raising awareness. I'd like to keep on working with organisations where they give me a voice to help, to explain. I want to be respectful because, like I said, I don't think anyone wakes up or anyone's born a racist, right? There's no such thing as being born a racist. I think it's the society and the environment we live in that leads to lack of equality. But I think, you're talking about it, I'm talking about it, this will be publicised, people will listen to it. It's another form of awareness, right? And I think that's we owe it all to ourselves just to be open. And that's what I've said to everyone, when someone, I'll give you a great example, 23, 24 years old, I had dreadlocks down to my shoulders. And going for a job with dreadlocks down to your shoulders, I was a big lad as well. I played rugby, so I was 15, maybe 16, 17 stone. You can look somewhat daunting at an interview, right? And I didn't get a job. 15 interviews in a row. I didn't get a job.
Really well.
And I cut my wife cut my hair. She was my girlfriend at the time. She cut my hair and shaved my head bald actually. And I went for that next job and I got the job, right? And that's just a society point. How I looked, I didn't look the way certain individuals wanted me to look for those particular firms. Mm-hmm. When I made the society changes they wanted me to make, I got the job. And I recognise that, and I understand the challenges that are still are still there. But I think we all owe it to ourselves just to point it out and help organisations and help people to understand why creating an open and equal environment is really important moving forward.
No, I absolutely agree. And 3,000 messages from a post on LinkedIn would definitely say that people are looking up to you as an inspiration in your position and what you've achieved. And I think it's a vitally important conversation to be had. I personally find it slightly difficult to even talk about it, but I'm not afraid to say that because it's me learning all the time. And I think that, like I say, it's sad to hear so many stories, but at the same time, I think this is important, and we're moving forward now. I really do believe that, and hopefully you do as well. On that really important note, and I'm actually really touched by this, is I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'd like to thank you so much for your time. You're an incredibly busy guy. I really appreciate it. For everybody, I hadn't spoken to David before the conversation today, and he only lives a mile up the road for me, so I'm probably going to go past him on my bike a little bit later on. So I might even see you out and about.
If you do, please pop in for a cup of tea.
100%, I'd love to. Thank you so much. Are you okay with 3,000 messages? If people wanted to reach out to you, are you open to receiving messages? I'm sure you're a very busy guy, but you open to receiving messages from people?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I got on in my career because people gave me an opportunity, and I reached out to people. Right, it doesn't just happen. You have to engineer it. You have to create a network. You have to be proactive. And if I can help anyone, if I can give them some advice, please do pick up the phone or send me a LinkedIn, which is probably more easily pick up the phone to me, because I might not get back to you, and I'll do my best to respond and support.
Thank you very much for your time, David.
Ben, all the best. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.